late last year, the previous city council annexed approximately 155 plus acres into the city of Killeen. It was subsequently rezoned to R1 single family residential and has since been subdivided into a single family subdivision. One thing that was not done during that time was to amend the future land use map. This is something that we're bringing forward to you now. We have brought it forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission several months ago, but not having a quorum, we weren't able to move forward. The area was previously rural, as all areas outside the city limits have been designated in the future land use map. We're simply asking the council to amend the plan to general residential, which is consistent with the areas that are in the city in this area. And just for the sake of the viewing public and you all, this area is located south of Stan Sleeter Loop, about 0.6 of a mile on the west right-of-way of Bunny Trail. It's a single-family residential subdivision. So before you tonight is simply an amendment to the future land use map to make it consistent with the development characteristics of the area from rural to general residential. I'd like to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Ms. McElwain? Mr. Clark?
So this is the item that was before us in August of last year. It took 3 meetings for everything to happen. I'm just trying to refresh my memory a little bit.
You're exactly correct. Yes, sir.
And the piece that we missed is we didn't change the future land use map.
That is correct.
It's what we typically do when something's already in the city limits.
Yes.
But in this case, this was outside of the city limits.
Yes.
And I remember the petitioner, the original document was to bring that land into the
Yes,
city
sir.
limits. I don't know if we necessarily did anything out of order, because as we bring property into the city limits, that gives us an opportunity to collect ad valorem taxes, sell water, pick up garbage, provide all the services that we provide to generate revenue and provide the service.
That's correct.
So really this item here has nothing to do with the work that's already been done. It's just bringing the future land use map into compliance.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
For just a kind of a training point of view, could the city attorney give us some sort of guidance on our thought processes and what we have to go through in order to make a change to the comprehensive plan for the land use?
Make sure that I'm understanding. Are you talking about the technical steps that you would need to take, or?
Just kind of like the factors that we need to look at.
Okay, when you're talking about the comprehensive plan, it's along the same lines as a zoning discussion that you would need to have, and there are a set of factors that we look at that we call the FAR and Tippett factors, and you look at the current use of the land, and you look at what the proposed use of the land is, and you, let's see, I'm looking for my factors. Some of the things that you would consider is whether the request is designed to lessen congestion in the streets. What is the nature and degree of any adverse impact that this change might have on neighboring lands? Whether it's suitable or unsuitable as it's currently zoned and presented in the plan. Is there a need to make this change to the plan? And is it consistent with what's going on in the neighborhood? Is this change necessary? Is it consistent with the way that the area is being currently used or proposed to be used? Is that what you were looking for,
It
Mr.
appears that staff gives us an analysis in our memorandum of the scope of the amendment, the change in circumstances, consistency with other plans, adequate information, and stakeholder input. It appears that we get that information on each one. Based upon this information that we get, what's then is our thought process on whether or not we're going to approve it or not.
Right. Those are the things that you do need to consider, and if you do feel that the change is necessary and that it's in line and that it's in compliance with the laws that you've established for changing the plan, and that there would be no harm to the stakeholders group in the neighborhood, then yes, it would be allowed. And it would be in line to change the plan. Is that, okay, I'm not sure if I'm following you 100%.
Sure.
Thank you.
What are your questions for the city attorney, Mr. Sagara?
When you have, make a change to the plan, are we making an amendment or are we actually changing the plan itself?
You are changing the plan via an amendment. You would be amending the plan.
But is that amendment, I think I asked this before, is that amendment just for that one property, or is it if anybody else comes across with the same situation that's in the plan, you don't have to amend that particular situation again because it's already been?
Well, okay, there are two thoughts about that. You are making a change to that plan for that specific piece of property. So if there's a similar piece of property on the other side of town, because you changed it here, it's not going to automatically change it over there. But if the circumstances are similar, then we probably would expect that those owners would say, well, you had a similar situation over there, you changed it for them, then you should change it for me. You're not required to do it, but you would need to have a good reason why you did change it for this one certain circumstances, but why you're not changing it for a similar
So
circumstance.
even though the same situation, they would still have to apply?
Yes, absolutely. They would have to meet the same requirements. And no two circumstances will be 100% the same, so there will always be differences. Some will be more similar than others, so in every case, you'll be able to distinguish them in some way, but I mean, I think it would be our recommendation as staff to try to be as consistent as you possibly can.
Any other questions? A lot of times we're going to get these along with the rezoning request at the same time, right, city attorney? And some of those are contentious. Any other questions? Yes, Carter?
Actually, I have a question for Mr. McElwain. Looking at page 2, and I know a lot of the work's already been done, so this is really a training question also. When a petitioner is asking to bring a large parcel into the city limits, in this case it was 153 acres, where in our organization are we looking at existing infrastructure, water, sewer, drainage? I'm talking about existing structure.
Yes.
Like if a council member, where would we get information to say, does the sewer system that's in place for this area that we're getting ready to accept 153 acres, which is going to put pressure on that system, where in the process are those questions asked? And we as council members, where do we go to ask those questions? Because we're really being asked to make a very important decision to bring 153 acres. That's a lot of homes, that's a lot of kitchen sinks, that's a lot of commodes, that's a lot of fresh water, road infrastructure, all that else.
Very good question. As you know, our Executive Director of Public Works is in attendance at most of these meetings and certainly available, and that would be Mr. Richard Mackey, who's to my left and behind me. His staff has information that you would need in order to answer those critical questions for your constituents, whether or not you want to look at pressure points as it relates to water, sewer capacity, roadway capacity. We do have staff available to answer the questions for the public. At the time that a large-scale proposal comes forward to you, typically if it's done with an annexation, we provide a service report to you where we'll go out and talk to fire, police, public works to see if it is actually feasible for us to entertain even bringing this parcel into the city. In this particular case it was because it's adjacent to existing development that we have in the city. So for those of you on the dais, if you have any questions about that, I would just tell you to contact the city manager so that he can route your call accordingly. We can get those questions answered. Some of the master planning documents, Mr. Clark, are on the Public Works webpage and would be available for the public viewing as well as far as existing infrastructure that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Mackey.
The water sewer master plan in particular is very deep.
The water and sewer master plan in particular is very detailed with regard to that infrastructure. Any other questions for Mr. McElwain? Okay, next item, page 3.
Page 3, if I can just get your indulgence, this is a request that was triggered by First Baptist Church, and at the time that we were entertaining a conversation with the applicant, It was revealed during the public hearing, during the Planning and Zoning Commission workshop, that they were simply rezoning their property to put in one sign. I ask that you consider removing PH38 from your agenda. Their request does not rise to the level of any amendment to the future land use map. That was something that the staff came to the same conclusion as the Planning and Zoning Commission back several months ago. It's on your agenda because we don't reserve the right to not put something on your agenda that has been presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So, future land use map should be for changes in the character of a community. A sign does not trigger a change in a future land use map. So, I'd like to ask that you consider removing 3A from your agenda, but not 3B. And if I can go to 3B, if there are no questions, the current sign ordinance as it's written requires your property to be zoned as B3, which is our local business district. If you want to erect an electronic video messaging sign, First Baptist Church wants to do just that. We took them through the public hearing process with the Planning and Zoning Commission. And at that point in time, the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation to the council was to approve B3 zoning along the outer fringes of the church property. This will be along W.S. Young, and also they also entertained Little Milton Road. Since that time, one of the pastors from First Baptist Church has come into the planning office and said, we don't need that much of the property rezoned. We're only interested in putting in an additional zoning district along the W.S. Young frontage to facilitate putting in the EVMS sign. So what we have before you tonight is to consider rezoning the frontage possibly to a depth of 50 feet along W.S. Young for the church to put in an additional electronic video messaging sign. That was one of the shortcomings in the sign ordinance that will be coming to you at a later date. The church has been waiting since November to get going on this, so I'm sure they would definitely love your consideration on this item.
That 50 foot then would allow for any sort of commercial use if that was ever abandoned.
That's correct, sir.
Any questions for Mr. McElwain? Mr. Clark?
I'm looking at the map that you provided. I'm trying to get a vision in my head. I see that this is on the Little Nolan Road. Are we nearer the Little Nolan Road intersection, or are we a little bit south of that?
We're actually, if I can, and I hope your packet might not be the same as mine, but there's a large map that shows a close-up of the hatched area, which is the church property. Yes, sir, Mr. Corbin, Mayor Corbin has that. That area that has just the frontage on South W.S. Young Drive is what we're looking at just rezoning. The entire frontage back to a depth of approximately 50 feet. The reason we say the entire frontage is because we want to have maximum flexibility for them to consider a range of options to put the sign up. And I think that would help facilitate that process. That, to my knowledge, would be sufficient for the church, as I recall the conversation I had with them.
What I'm thinking about right now is there's that little strange intersection where W.S. Young comes together, where our citizens have to make that quick right, that strange little S curve there.
Yes.
Just want to make sure any decisions that we're making about W.S. Young leaves us enough latitude in the future where we can straighten that road out, where we don't have to go buy a sign from somebody.
I believe we're good to go in that area. This sign won't be at or near the corner because those properties have been conveyed to another owner and not part of the church's property. So you're probably looking at just the extents of the existing parking lot as you face the church from W.S. Young, where the sign could go. I don't think I have anyone that attends tonight, but I would be sure that they can probably explain to you better than I can as far as what they're looking at placing a sign on the sign.
Thank you.
Do you see additional questions, Ms. Blackstone?
You said something about the sign ordinance, and is this going to be in compliance with the sign ordinance as passed? Is it important to have the sign ordinance in place before we approve this sign?
Not necessarily. One of the things that this zoning does is allow them to proceed in advance of the sign ordinance. Not to get off topic, but one of the things that we looked at with the sign ordinance was to prevent things like this from happening with churches and schools who routinely need to have electronic video messaging signs. It's a little too restrictive as it related to those institutional uses.
Foster, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask quickly, aside from the technical restrictions on an EMD, can you speak briefly, and then we'll get into this with the sign ordinance, I'm sure, but about the character of such a sign? For instance, across the street, the Killeen Civic and Conference Center has one that's fairly benign in terms of appearance and everything, but I just wondered what that allows for.
We did have a brief discussion, Mr. Foster, with the pastor from the church, and at that point in time, I don't think the sign that they were proposing was any larger in scale than what we typically see in the area. Now, with that being said, I don't recall the specifics as far as the dimensions of the sign, and it's been some months now, so I can get you that information in advance of Tuesday's meeting. Certainly, I think that would be helpful for you. But the purpose is to have them comply with all provisions of the code, but to not prevent any further delays in terms of them having the ability to move forward. They'd rather not rezone the property, to be honest with you, but with the uncertainty in terms of the timing, they just wanted to move ahead.
Any other questions for Mr. McElwain? Thank you, sir. Let's go on to TH, what, 5 now? Order.
TH4.
This deals with Young K and Kyung S. Na. They are property owners that own approximately 1 acre along Camp Drive, which, as you know, sits right off the intersection of Clear Creek Road. Their intent is to build a restaurant, and they have not yet broken ground on any development, but Ms. Na explained to the Planning and Zoning Commission that she would like to have the ability to sell beer and wine in her restaurant. So the request is to rezone the property from B5 to RC1. That's our restaurant sales district that allows alcohol to be served on site. The item went forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we notified 3 surrounding property owners. We received no protest or responses. The recommendation to you from the Planning and Zoning Commission is to approve this rezone request, but limit the RC1 portion to the footprint of the future restaurant. That is what the recommendation is from the Planning and Zoning Commission. That typically has been the norm in terms of RC1 zonings, to limit to the footprint of the existing, or in this case, proposed restaurant, to make sure it's restricted to the business itself.
Since it isn't built yet, do they have some sort of survey or something where they could show us what that footprint is?
We do not as of yet. I talked to her today, and I don't think she's any closer to putting that plan into fruition. What we typically do, Mayor Corbin, is at the time that they come and apply for a building permit, since it's within our department, and we get the plans, we then will scale out the building and actually go into the GIS system and place the RC1 zoning there ourselves to keep a handle on the situation.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Foster?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, in the event of, good times and the need for expansion, what would customarily be the process that the business owners would follow?
They have come in and have asked for an expansion if they are indeed expanding. So you would reconsider their request and make sure it's a viable restaurant, and it gives you, the council, ultimate flexibility and decision-making authority if that happens.
Mr. Clark?
Make sure I heard things correct. This is vacant property,
Yes, sir.
and we have current owners. If we make this zoning change for a building that may appear in the future, and then these owners sell that property, does this change or to sell alcohol on this property automatically convey to a new owner?
It does. Zoning, and that's a very good question. Zoning runs with the land, not the landowner. So once a zoning district is applied to a piece of property, it is permanent until such time a zoning zoning change is requested and approved by the city council. In the event that the property is conveyed to someone else and they do not wish to sell alcohol, they're still allowed, under the way our code is written, to do a commercial use that would be consistent with a B4 zoning district or one zoning district that is B4 zoning district or less, excuse me. So in effect, if they don't sell alcohol as a restaurant use, the zoning of RC1 is actually more restrictive than the surrounding B5 zoning that they currently have on the property.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. McElwain? Thank you. Let's go on to PH5.
PH5 Council is the Will D Company LLC, operates as Billy Bob's Restaurant. This is the Billy Bob's location located off of East Stand Sleeper Loop. Like Miss Snob, Billy Bob's, the owners of that, the proprietors of that restaurant, excuse me, would like to sell beer in conjunction with the food that they have on site. The staff notified 5 surrounding property owners. This does include the church property, which is adjacent to this site. We didn't receive any responses, no protests of any kind. The Planning and Zoning Commission, in their deliberation, recommend approval of the rezone, and again, limiting the rezone to the existing building. Just to let you know, we typically measure using TABC standard to see if any alcohol use is consistent in terms of how far it is from churches, how far it is from public and private schools, how far it is from hospitals. So in the previous case and this case, we did not violate any of the TBC regulations, which is a 300-foot measurement from front door along rights of way to the adjacent front door. So we do that with every case. There were no violations here, no responses from the church. So the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission is for approval of the RC1 request.
Any questions for Mr. McElwain, Mr. Scar?
Now that we're seeing more of these alcohol-related businesses, what can maybe the city attorney kind of refresh? What are us as a council? What are the guidelines that we can use? Because I know you kind of mentioned with planning and zoning, as long as they're doing everything that they're supposed to, we have to approve them. Does that kind of run the same for this?
You mean
Alcohol. Yes.
Sorry, yes. You're actually more restricted when you're dealing with alcohol-related businesses, or specifically businesses that are regulated by the TABC that hold a liquor license from the TABC. The state law says that we are preempted from passing any law that is more restrictive than the state law regarding alcohol businesses. This means that when you are looking at a business, you can't make your decision based upon the fact that this business sells alcohol. And that's true of what you're doing here, which is the restaurant zoning, and also of the case that's coming up next, which is a package store. So it's basically the same analysis. So you're able to look at hours of operation in general, if you would do that for any other business that sat on that piece of property that didn't sell alcohol. If you're going to say, well, you shouldn't be open until 2 o'clock, so that might not be a good place for you because you're selling tires, or because you are a mini storage building or something like that. So you can't treat businesses that hold TABC licenses more strictly than you would any other business that's locating in your city. So actually, you have a little less leeway when you're dealing with alcohol businesses.
Any other questions? Mr. Okra?
What would be the recourse if it become apparent that the alcohol establishments become a public safety issue?
Well, those are what are called secondary effects to businesses such as this, and really it's a police issue. And we have had instances in Killeen where you have bars or nightclubs where there are a lot of police calls, and then what happens is the police department works with TABC, and then they have the liquor license removed from that business, effectively shutting them down. So that's the recourse. When you have a problem business, you deal with the legal aspects, you deal with the criminal aspects, and take care of it that way.
With the zoning remains as it was.
That's correct.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. McElwain. Page 6?
Page 6, this is your last public hearing item I'm going to brief you on tonight. As the city attorney alluded to, this is your first foray into the realm of package stores. The James Robert Group LLC is looking to construct a plaza, if you will, that sits at the intersection of West Ansleta Loop and Saddle Ridge. The property is vacant and currently zoned for B3, which is our local business district. I want to direct your attention to, I provided you 2 graphics in your packet. One deals with a survey prepared by Mitchell & Associates that shows an approximate 1,800 square foot area. That is a representation of what the developer intends to lease out as a package store if they're successful. The second sheet shows you a site plan of the property as it was presented to the staff that would show the development of the site. The package store would be in the smaller building to the right, occupying a lease area if approved by the council. Just by way of just a refresher, the state heavily regulates the sale of alcohol through package stores. The request is for B3A. The staff notified 5 surrounding property owners and didn't receive any protest. Planning and Zoning Commission in their review of the site looked at the area in question, took note of the square foot area of the property. A minimum of 10,000 square feet is necessary. A 25-foot rear yard setback is necessary, and facade standards kick into place. The P&Z's recommendation to you is to approve the B3A zoning limited to the 1,800 square foot area as shown by the applicant's agent in your packet. If they are successful and we get a plan that does not comply with 1,800 square feet, we would then have to go and revisit this with the applicant. So we've not gotten any updates from the applicant's agent. I spoke to them today. So this is the request, 1,800 square feet for a future package store at this location.
Any questions with regard to page 6? Questions? Thank you, Mr. McElwain.
Thank you.